The hall was not a grand place. It was a medium-sized community space that people rented for small events, charity evenings, and local gatherings. The lights were warm but slightly dim, and the wooden floor showed signs of age. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and at the front of the room stood an old upright piano. Its surface had scratches, and some keys were a little yellow from years of use. It was not the kind of piano people took seriously anymore, but it still worked and it still held sound inside it. People slowly filled the room. Some came because they were invited, some because they were curious, and others because there was nothing else to do that evening. Most of them talked loudly, laughed, and checked their phones. A few greeted friends they had not seen in a while. The mood was casual, almost careless. No one expected anything special to happen. She arrived quietly. She did not walk in with confidence or try to draw attention. She wore simple clothes, clean but plain, the kind that helped her blend into the background. Her hair was tied back without effort, and her face showed signs of a long day. She looked like someone who worked hard and did not have much time for herself. When she stepped into the hall, only a few people noticed and even fewer cared. She stood near the back for a moment, holding her bag close. She scanned the room as if she were looking for something familiar, but her eyes did not rest on anyone for long. There was a nervous energy in her movements, small and controlled, like she was trying not to be seen too much. She took a seat along the side, away from the center, and waited. People around her whispered, not because she mattered, but because humans whisper when they judge. Some noticed her clothes. Some noticed the way she sat, slightly stiff, hands folded together. A few exchanged looks and smirks, making quiet guesses about why she was there. Their thoughts were quick and unkind, formed without effort. Someone near the front laughed and said something about the piano being available for anyone brave enough to try it. The words were meant as a joke. A few people chuckled. The piano had become more of a decoration than an instrument. It was there to fill space, not to be played by someone like her. She heard the laughter. Her shoulders tightened for a second, but she did not turn around. She had heard laughter like that before in different places at different times of her life. It was familiar. Painful, yes, but familiar enough that she knew how to carry it without showing it on her face. As time passed, the room grew louder. Conversations overlapped. Someone spilled a drink. Chairs scraped against the floor. The event organizer spoke briefly, welcoming everyone and explaining that this was meant to be a relaxed evening. No pressure, no expectations. Just a place to share time. The piano was mentioned again. The organizer joked that anyone could come up and play if they felt like it. More laughter followed. Most people saw it as a challenge meant for someone bold, confident, maybe even trained. Not for someone who looked like she belonged at the back of the room. She lowered her gaze. Inside her, thoughts moved slowly and carefully. She told herself she did not have to do anything. She reminded herself why she came. She had promised someone she would show up, even if she stayed quiet. Sitting there was already a step she had almost not taken. Her eyes drifted toward the piano without her meaning to. The sight of it stirred something deep inside her chest. The shape of it, the way it stood alone. It reminded her of another time, another place, when music was not something distant but something close and alive. She remembered small rooms filled with sound. Long evenings when the world felt lighter. Fingers moving over keys without fear. Back then, no one laughed. No one doubted. Music had been her safe place. Her voice when she did not know how to speak. Life changed that. Responsibilities came. Hard choices followed. Music slowly moved to the side, replaced by work, by care for others, by survival. The piano became a memory, something folded away to make room for reality. She did not tell people about that part of her life. Felt easier to let it stay hidden. A sharp laugh pulled her back to the present. Someone nearby was making a joke about how funny it would be if the wrong person tried to play. More smirks. More looks. None of them were cruel enough to be loud, but they were careless enough to be clear. She felt heat rise to her face, then fade. She took a slow breath. Her heart beat faster, not from fear alone, but from something else rising beneath it. A quiet decision forming, not sudden but steady. She stood up. The movement was small, but it caught a few eyes. People glanced over, surprised more than interested. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder and took a step forward. Then another. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the floor itself was asking her to stop. Whispers followed her. Some people nudged each other. Others leaned back in their chairs to watch. A few smiled, expecting something awkward. They did not know why she was walking toward the piano, but they were certain it would not end well. She felt every stare, every silent judgment. Her hands trembled slightly, and she hid them by pressing them against her bag. Her breathing was slow and controlled, something she had learned long ago. If she stopped now, she knew she would regret it. Not because of them, but because of herself. She reached the piano. Up close, it looked older than she remembered. The wood was worn smooth where many hands had touched it. A faint smell of dust and polish filled the air. She placed her bag down gently, as if she were placing a fragile object, and stood there for a moment. The room quieted, not out of respect, but out of curiosity. Someone laughed softly. She ignored it. She pulled the bench back and sat down. The sound of the bench scraping the floor felt loud, almost embarrassing. She adjusted her position, feet flat on the ground, back straight. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers curled slightly, remembering shapes they had not touched in years. A few people shook their heads. Others whispered comments that were not meant to be heard but were loud enough to sting. The air felt thick, filled with doubt and expectation of failure. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. In that second, the room disappeared. The noise faded. There was only the piano, the weight of her body on the bench, and the steady rhythm of her breath. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was not there to prove something. She was there because something inside her needed to be heard again. She opened her eyes. Her hands lifted slowly and hovered above the keys. The room waited, some with laughter ready, others with boredom, none with belief. Her fingers moved closer. The first note had not yet been played, but something was already changing. She had not played a piano in years. The last time her fingers had danced across the keys, life had been simpler in some ways and harder in others. Music had been her companion, her secret friend, the one thing that never judged her and never demanded anything in return. But then responsibilities had piled up. Jobs, bills, family matters, and the constant push to survive had pushed her piano and her music into a corner. The instrument had not gone silent on its own. She had been the one to stop visiting it. Yet, sitting here now, the old memories came flooding back. She remembered the small room in her childhood home where a piano sat near the window. Rain had fallen against the glass on many evenings while she played, and the world outside had seemed to disappear. No one had been there to judge her, no one had laughed. The piano had been a bridge between who she was and who she wanted to be, a way to speak when words were impossible. Her mind wandered through those times as she looked at the piano in front of her now. It was not the grand instrument she had grown up with, but it had character, history, and life. She could see faint scratches where hands had pressed down over the years, and a few keys stuck slightly when pressed. These imperfections did not matter. They gave the piano personality, just like life gave her personality with its ups and downs. She remembered how her talent had first been noticed. Teachers had once complimented her, told her she had a gift. Friends had listened quietly, amazed by how easily her fingers could express emotion. But life had demanded something else from her then. She had left music to focus on things that felt urgent. Paying bills, helping family, getting through long shifts at work. Playing the piano became a luxury she could not afford. Despite the years away, she had never stopped thinking about music. Every now and then, a melody would come uninvited, rising in her mind when she was cooking, walking, or washing dishes. Each time it reminded her that a part of her had been silent, not because it had died, but because she had chosen survival over expression. She had chosen to hide that part of herself. Now, sitting at this piano, the feeling of hiding was gone. She was here, in front of people who did not expect much, with a history behind her that no one knew. They laughed, whispered, and smirked, but their judgments could not touch what she carried inside. She had something stronger than their doubts. Her own history, her own talent, and her own need to express herself. She let her fingers hover over the keys, feeling the cold surface beneath her skin. For a moment, she closed her eyes and let the tension in her shoulders melt. Memories of long hours practicing, of quiet nights alone with music, filled her mind. She thought about how music had shaped her patience, her focus, her understanding of rhythm and emotion. Music had taught her to feel deeply, even when the world around her was harsh and unkind. She opened her eyes and looked at the audience. Their faces were curious, skeptical, and even mocking. They did not know her, and they had no reason to respect her. But she did not care. Their opinions were noise, irrelevant compared to the story she wanted to tell with her music. Every person who had doubted her in life, every responsibility that had kept her from playing, every hard night spent wishing for something more. She carried it all in her hands now. She began to play slowly, lightly at first, almost hesitant. The first notes were soft, almost like whispers, echoing in the hall. It was not perfect, and it did not need to be. Her touch was delicate, and the sound carried her emotion. People shifted in their seats. A few glanced at each other, unsure whether to laugh or pay attention. The laughter that had filled the room before was gone, replaced by curiosity. The music grew steadier. Her fingers moved with confidence, recalling shapes and patterns that had been etched into her memory long ago. The melody told a story without words, a story of struggle, of patience, of survival. Every note was a sentence, every phrase a paragraph of her life. She did not play to impress. She played to remember, to reclaim, to show that years of silence had not diminished her gift. Some audience members leaned forward, surprised at the depth of sound filling the room. They had come expecting a performance that would end in awkwardness or mediocrity. Instead, they were listening to someone who had lived, someone whose emotions had been sharpened by real life. There was no pretense, no need for applause, only honesty in every note. She paused briefly, letting the last note linger. Silence followed, heavy and full, as if the room was holding its breath. She felt a calm inside herself, the kind that comes when you reconnect with a lost part of your soul. It was a small victory, invisible to most, but profound to her. Then she continued, her fingers dancing over the keys with more confidence. The melody shifted, revealing moments of joy and warmth alongside the lingering sorrow. She played what she felt, not what others wanted to hear. Every chord carried her story of resilience, of the quiet strength that had kept her going through difficult times. Each note was a reminder that the years away from music had not broken her, only prepared her for this moment. The room remained silent. The whispers had stopped. Eyes that had rolled or smirked now widened with interest. Some people felt a strange pull, an emotional tug that made them uncomfortable and fascinated at the same time. They could feel that this music came from real life, from lived experience, and it resonated in a way they had not expected. She remembered why she had returned. Not for approval, not for recognition, but for herself. She had been patient, had waited quietly, had endured judgment without complaint. Now, she was reclaiming something that was hers by right. Her voice, her story, her music. As she played, small memories surfaced like fragments of the past. A teacher who once encouraged her. Friends who listened in silence. Long nights alone with the piano as her only company. Those memories fueled her playing, giving it depth and texture. It was a living history, expressed not in words but in sound. She noticed that a few audience members had stopped talking entirely. They were captivated, unsure how to respond, caught between admiration and disbelief. They had underestimated her, assumed she was ordinary, and now they were realizing how wrong they had been. The music did not scream for attention. It simply existed, and that was enough to command it. Her fingers moved faster now, more fluidly. The melody became richer, weaving in layers of emotion that reflected years of life experience. Joy and sorrow, hope and disappointment, patience and determination. All intertwined in a seamless story. The music was honest, raw, and human. carried a truth that no mockery could touch. The longer she played, the more she felt a connection to everyone present, even those who had doubted her. The music spoke where words could not. Some faces softened, some eyes glistened with emotion. She played not for applause but for recognition of the shared humanity in the room. Every note was a bridge between her life and the lives of others, connecting their experiences through something timeless. For a moment, she allowed herself to smile, a small, quiet smile. It was not about victory over the audience. It was about rediscovering herself, about feeling the power of expression that had been dormant for too long. The music had become more than sound. It was a statement, a reclaiming of her life and her history. When she finally paused again, the room was filled with a different kind of silence. It was respectful, thoughtful, almost reverent. People were no longer judging. They were listening, feeling, and perhaps understanding a little more than they had before. She closed her eyes and let the stillness sink in. The weight of years of silence, of being overlooked, lifted slightly from her shoulders. In that quiet, she found a piece of herself she had thought was gone. It was not the applause that mattered, not the approval of others. It was the realization that she had not lost herself, that she had returned to her own voice and it had been waiting for her all along. Her hands rested on the keys, still and calm. The audience remained silent, unsure how to react, some holding their breath, some processing what they had just witnessed. They had expected nothing, and instead, they had been given a glimpse of something real, something lived, something human. In that moment, she understood why she had come. Not to prove them wrong, not to impress, not to show off. She had come to remember, to reconnect, to reclaim a part of her life that had been hidden. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone present that talent, when born of true experience and emotion, cannot be ignored or diminished. The room was quiet now, but the silence was different from before. It was no longer full of whispers or small jokes. It was a waiting silence, heavy and curious. People shifted in their seats, their eyes fixed on her. Some crossed their arms, trying to hide their surprise. Others leaned forward, almost unconsciously, drawn by something they could not name. She sat at the piano, her hands poised above the keys, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. She remembered the first time she had ever performed in front of anyone. Not a competition or a recital, but simply for friends and family. Her hands had been shaking, her heart racing. She had been unsure if she could express what she felt inside. But once her fingers found the keys, once the notes filled the air, she had felt a sense of freedom that nothing else could give. Tonight was similar but different. She was not performing for approval. She was performing for herself, and yet, everyone in the room was part of her audience. A few people exchanged nervous glances. They had come expecting something ordinary, someone clumsy or unskilled. Instead, they saw a person completely absorbed in the moment, a woman who belonged to her music more than she belonged to the room. Her eyes were calm but focused, her posture straight, her fingers hovering over the keys as if they were extensions of her thoughts. There was a confidence there, quiet and unspoken, that made the room pay attention. She pressed the first note, and it sounded soft but clear. It was not a dramatic start, no grand gesture or loud flourish, just a single note that seemed to hang in the air. A few people shifted uncomfortably, realizing that this was not going to be a joke or a brief moment of curiosity. This was something different, something they had not anticipated. The second note followed, then a third, and soon a melody began to take shape. It was simple at first, almost hesitant, as if she was testing the space, listening to the room, and feeling the piano come alive under her hands. The sound was rich and warm, carrying a depth that no one expected. She did not rush. She let each note breathe, letting it resonate and fill the space around her. Some audience members felt a strange shift inside them. They had come to mock, to judge, or simply to fill an evening, and now they were caught in something real. They could sense the history behind the music, the years of practice, the emotions stored in every movement. It was not just skill. It was life experience translating into sound. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, practicing for hours when the world outside seemed too loud, too demanding. The piano had been a sanctuary, a place where mistakes did not matter, where feelings could pour out without restraint. Those nights had taught her patience, discipline, and the beauty of persistence. All of that was here now, in her hands, speaking louder than any words ever could. The melody grew slowly, becoming more confident, more expressive. Her fingers moved over the keys with a fluidity that seemed effortless, each note connecting to the next with a story of its own. She allowed herself small moments of improvisation, letting her feelings guide her, letting her memories dictate the rhythm and flow. The music was alive, just as she was, shaped by every hardship, every joy, every silent struggle she had endured. A few people began to notice the change in the room. Whispers had vanished, replaced by attentive silence. Some faces softened, the mocking expressions replaced by wonder or disbelief. People who had doubted her now felt something deeper, a quiet admiration mixed with curiosity. They were not used to seeing someone so composed, so absorbed in something so personal, and yet so powerful. She glanced up briefly, noticing the reactions around her. She did not let it distract her. She played not for them, but with them, as if the music could connect her private world with the room full of strangers. She wanted them to feel what she felt, not to praise her, not to laugh, not to whisper. She wanted them to understand, even if only for a few moments, the weight and beauty of returning to something you love after years of neglect. Her melody shifted, incorporating moments of tension and release. There were minor notes that hinted at struggle, at frustration, at the years of silence and doubt. Then, moments of major notes arrived, light and warm, carrying hope, relief, and quiet triumph. It was a reflection of her life, complex but coherent, filled with peaks and valleys, moments of despair and moments of clarity. The room absorbed it all, even if some did not realize exactly what they were feeling. She let herself feel the music fully. She could remember every night spent alone at a piano, the joy of discovering a new chord, the frustration when her fingers would not cooperate, the quiet satisfaction of mastering something small. Each of those experiences now informed every note she played, giving the melody an authenticity that no one could fake. It was not about technique alone, it was about life lived, reflected in sound. Some audience members were leaning forward now, unable to hide their fascination. They were drawn into the story that unfolded through her hands, a story that was intimate and public at the same time. Even those who had arrived intending to mock her could not help but be moved, unsure how to respond, realizing they had underestimated her completely. She paused briefly, letting a chord resonate longer than usual. It was a small gesture, but it drew attention, highlighting the emotion behind the note. Silence filled the hall, almost reverent, as if the audience collectively realized that this was not mere performance. This was something rare, something personal and unrepeatable, something that transcended expectation. Her fingers resumed movement, now more confident, more fluid. The melody grew richer, more layered, as she combined her knowledge, skill, and experience. She played with intention, with feeling, with history. Every note seemed to speak directly to the listeners, though no words were uttered. The room was fully engaged, every eye on her, every ear listening intently, every heart unknowingly touched by the story unfolding. She could feel herself connecting with the piano again, the instrument responding to her touch as if it remembered her from years ago. The keys were no longer cold or indifferent. They were alive beneath her fingers, ready to carry her emotions, her memories, and her story. She let herself smile faintly, not because of the audience, but because of the joy of rediscovering a part of herself that had been silent for too long. The melody grew faster, more intricate, but never chaotic. Her hands moved effortlessly, almost as if they were floating. Each phrase had meaning, each chord had purpose. The audience could sense the life behind every sound, the countless hours of dedication and practice, the pain and beauty of years lived quietly, patiently, and purposefully. Some people in the room were visibly moved. A few eyes glistened with unshed tears. Others sat in stunned silence, unsure how to respond, feeling a mix of admiration, surprise, and something else they could not quite name. The mocking energy that had filled the room before was completely gone, replaced by attention, respect, and a quiet awe. She continued, her music telling a story without words, carrying the weight of all her experiences. Joy and sorrow intertwined, hope and regret coexisted, strength and vulnerability were balanced perfectly. Every note reflected her resilience, her patience, her courage, and her journey back to this moment, to this piano, to herself. For a brief instant, she allowed herself to take it in, to feel the room's energy, to realize how far she had come. Years of silence, doubt, and struggle had led her here. She was not performing for recognition, not for applause, not for approval. She was performing because she had returned to her own voice, her own story, her own expression. The audience was captivated. No one moved, no one spoke, and no one laughed. The music had become more than sound. It had become a presence, an experience, a moment of truth that could not be ignored or diminished. People who had mocked her or doubted her now felt the power of real talent, the strength of someone who had lived and persevered, the authenticity of emotion conveyed through music. She let the final notes linger, allowing them to resonate and fade naturally. The room was silent, and the stillness that followed was heavy with meaning. It was not just the end of a piece. It was a testament to resilience, to returning to something you love, to reclaiming your voice after years of being unheard. Her hands rested on the keys, calm and steady. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the music settle inside her, knowing that she had expressed what needed to be said. She had returned to her piano, to herself, and to a piece of life that had been waiting patiently for her all along. The room remained quiet, but she knew that something profound had happened in those few minutes, something that no words could fully capture, something that would linger in the hearts of everyone present. The room held its breath. Every note she played carried weight beyond sound, and for the first time, the audience began to realize how wrong their assumptions had been. What had started as quiet mocking had faded entirely, replaced by an intense curiosity that clung to every corner of the hall. People leaned forward instinctively, their eyes fixed, their previous laughter nowhere to be found. Her fingers moved with a fluidity that seemed both effortless and deliberate. The melody shifted, now bold and intricate, every note precise yet full of feeling. It was as if she was speaking through the piano, telling a story that had no words, a story composed of years of waiting, years of practice, and years of quiet resilience. Each movement of her hands was confident, measured, yet full of passion. The people who had underestimated her suddenly realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. It happened quickly, almost unnoticed. 10 seconds passed, and the air in the room changed completely. Laughter had disappeared entirely. Whispers ceased. The murmurs of doubt and anticipation that had filled the space were gone. In those 10 seconds, the ordinary had become extraordinary. The mocking faces in the crowd now looked shocked, some in disbelief, others in awe. The energy shifted, and it was clear that everyone in the room was holding their breath, captivated by the sound that had transformed the space. Her music seemed to echo not just in the hall but in the hearts of the listeners. It carried a power born of real-life experience, of struggle and patience, of emotions that had never found words but had found expression in sound. The melody rose and fell, soft and tender at times, bold and commanding at others. There was a human truth in every note, a depth that demanded attention, a clarity that silenced doubt. People felt it. Some could not stop themselves from gripping the arms of their chairs. Others leaned closer, as if to make sure they were really hearing what was happening. Eyes widened. Breathing became slow and deliberate. The room was alive with tension and emotion, yet no one spoke. The piano, simple and worn, had become a vessel for something far greater than anyone had expected. She had returned to this moment after years of silence, carrying with her the weight of lost time and forgotten opportunities. Each note she played reminded her of the nights she had spent alone, practicing in dim rooms, pouring her feelings into keys that never judged her. She had learned to translate the pain, the hope, the joy, and the quiet victories of her life into music. Now, the audience, who had mocked her so lightly, was experiencing it all firsthand. The sound seemed to fill the space entirely, brushing against walls and ceilings, wrapping around every listener. It was intimate, personal, yet impossible to ignore. Some people felt a chill run down their spines. Others felt tears welling up unexpectedly. The 10 seconds had passed, yet the effect lingered, as if the music had reached into their minds and touched something they had long forgotten. It was not just skill. It was lived experience conveyed in its purest form. She played on, her fingers moving with increasing certainty, expressing every nuance of feeling. Her mind wandered back to the years she had chosen silence over expression, the moments when life had demanded practicality instead of passion. Every hardship, every challenge, every small victory she had quietly earned was embedded in the notes she now released into the hall. The music told a story of resilience, of courage, and of the quiet determination to never let go of what truly mattered. The audience, once ready to scoff, could not look away. Their faces had changed, some etched with surprise, some softened with emotion, others staring in disbelief. No one had anticipated the power of what they were hearing. The mocking, the casual assumptions had vanished completely. In those 10 seconds, everything had shifted. What they had expected to be trivial or entertaining had become unforgettable. She allowed the melody to swell, to rise and fall with emotion, to carry the story as it needed. It was not just about technique, though that was flawless. It was about the expression of life itself, captured in music. Each note reflected experience, memory, hope, and determination. She was speaking through the piano, using it as a voice to convey what words never could. Some people were leaning forward, caught in a trance of admiration and disbelief. They had underestimated her completely. Their laughter, their whispers, their mockery. All of it was gone, replaced by awe and reflection. They felt something they could not explain, something stirring in their hearts, an unspoken connection to the depth of feeling she was sharing. The melody shifted again, becoming more intricate, more alive. Her hands moved with such fluidity and control that it seemed impossible she had been away from the piano for so long. The audience felt each emotion with her, even if they had never known her story. It was a universal truth expressed in sound, reaching beyond words, beyond judgment, beyond expectation. Her focus never wavered. She did not glance at the crowd. She did not seek approval. She was immersed completely in the moment, letting the music flow through her, letting it carry everything she had held inside. The audience could sense the authenticity of it. This was not a performance for applause. This was life itself being expressed through keys and strings, through touch and feeling. The atmosphere became almost sacred. Every person present felt the gravity of the moment, even if they could not articulate it. The mocking and doubt that had filled the room before had evaporated entirely. The music commanded attention, and it demanded respect. Every note was a testament to her journey, to the quiet strength that had carried her back to this piano, to this room, to herself. The hall seemed to shrink around her, focused entirely on the sound and emotion she was releasing. Each chord resonated with meaning, each pause carried weight. People felt drawn into a story they did not know but understood instinctively. It was a story of struggle, of patience, of the courage to reclaim what had been lost. In that moment, the piano became not just an instrument but a bridge, connecting her life to the hearts of everyone in the room. She allowed the music to slow slightly, letting each note linger, giving space for the listeners to absorb the depth of what they were hearing. The effect was profound. Faces softened, breaths slowed, and eyes glistened. People who had expected comedy or awkwardness now sat in silence, stunned by the reality of the skill, the emotion, and the story she conveyed. For her, the 10 seconds had been a turning point, a moment where her confidence and experience converged. She had reclaimed her voice, her talent, and her story, and now she was sharing it without reservation. It was a reminder that true expression comes not from expectation or approval, but from authenticity and courage. That truth was palpable in every note, in every pause, in every subtle shift of the melody. The final notes began to flow, carrying with them a sense of resolution, a quiet triumph. The audience remained silent, enraptured. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Even the air seemed to hold still, as if recognizing the significance of what had just occurred. The music had transformed the space, and the people within it, in a way that would linger long after the last chord faded. She rested her hands gently on the keys, feeling the echo of the final notes vibrating through the piano and into the room. A sense of calm washed over her. She had played not for recognition, not for applause, but for herself, for the music, for the story she had been waiting years to tell. The room, too, seemed to understand, filled with a reverent silence that honored her courage and authenticity. The people in the audience were left changed. They had entered the hall with casual assumptions, with shallow expectations. They had been ready to mock, to judge, to ignore. In those 10 seconds, and in the minutes that followed, they had experienced something real, something human, something that could not be dismissed. She had shown them the power of returning to what you love, of embracing your talent, and of expressing yourself fully, even in the face of doubt and ridicule. She stood slowly, her gaze calm and focused. No need for words, no need for explanation. The room remained quiet, the impact of the performance settling in. The 10 seconds that had passed changed everything. The laughter, the mockery, the judgment, they had all vanished. What remained was respect, awe, and a deep, unspoken understanding of the power of authenticity and resilience. The piano, once just an object in the room, had become a vessel of truth, a conduit for a life fully expressed, and a reminder that true talent, born of experience and emotion, cannot be ignored or diminished. When the final note faded, the room remained quiet for a moment longer than usual. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the hall itself was catching its breath, trying to process the shift that had just occurred. The audience, once skeptical and ready to mock, now sat in stunned silence, feeling the weight of what they had witnessed. The woman at the piano rose slowly, her hands brushing the keys gently before she stepped back from the bench. She did not look for applause. She did not expect it. The power of the music lay not in recognition but in expression, in the reclaiming of a voice that had been quiet for too long. Every person in the room, even those who had doubted her, had been touched by something deeper than skill or performance. They had been shown the strength of patience, resilience, and authenticity. For them, the laughter and mockery of before seemed distant, almost shameful in its naivety. Some audience members stared in disbelief, unsure how to respond. They had been prepared to see awkwardness or failure, and instead, they had encountered truth. It was a performance not of showmanship but of life itself. Each chord, each note, had been imbued with years of experience, struggle, and quiet determination. They could feel it, almost physically, as if the music had filled their lungs and settled into their hearts. A few people exchanged glances, eyes wide and mouths slightly open. They had underestimated her completely. They had assumed the ordinary, the unremarkable. Now, they realized that what they had expected to be trivial or amusing was extraordinary. The piano, scratched and worn, had become a vessel of authenticity, carrying the weight of a story that no one had known until that moment. She walked slowly toward her bag, picking it up without looking at anyone. There was no triumph in her movements, no need to seek approval or validation. Her satisfaction was private, rooted in the knowledge that she had returned to her music, her passion, and herself. Years of silence, years of doubt, years of responsibilities that had pulled her away. All of it had led to this moment of quiet victory. Some audience members were still frozen, caught between admiration and disbelief. Others began to clap softly, unsure whether the gesture was enough to capture the depth of what they had just experienced. The applause grew, cautious at first, then stronger as the emotional impact sank in. But she did not bow or smile broadly. She acknowledged the room with a small nod, her focus already shifting inward, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the nights of solitude, practicing when no one was watching, pouring her emotions into the keys without expectation. She remembered the times she had doubted herself, the moments when she wondered if the passion she had nurtured for years was wasted. Every note she played tonight had been a testament to survival, resilience, and the courage to reclaim what had been temporarily lost. The audience began to murmur quietly, sharing impressions, exchanging expressions of awe. They spoke of skill, yes, but more than that, they spoke of something intangible. The honesty of the performance, the raw human emotion that had filled the room. They could feel the life experience behind the music, the pain and joy that shaped it. In that space, respect had replaced judgment, and admiration had replaced mockery. A few people approached the piano afterward, drawn by curiosity and the desire to understand more. They asked questions not to belittle, not to challenge, but to learn, to connect with the person who had created such a profound experience. She answered briefly, with grace and humility, her words careful and soft. She did not need to boast or explain herself. The music had spoken louder than any words could. She allowed herself a small smile, one that was private yet genuine. It was a smile for herself, for the years of perseverance and dedication, for the courage it had taken to return to the piano, for the moment when she had claimed her voice again. She knew that this smile, this quiet satisfaction, was the reward she had sought all along. People who had once mocked her now seemed almost ashamed of their assumptions. Some avoided eye contact, some looked down, while others simply stared in admiration, silently acknowledging that they had been wrong. She did not dwell on it. She had come to play, not to correct judgments. The transformation in the room was incidental but inevitable, a natural consequence of truth expressed fully and openly. She thought about what had led her here, the choices she had made, the sacrifices, the silent moments of practice, and the years of waiting. She realized that every challenge she had faced, every obstacle she had overcome, had been preparation for this night. The music had not only shared her story with the audience, but had also reaffirmed her own understanding of her strength, her patience, and her resilience. The applause eventually settled into a steady rhythm, not loud, not overwhelming, but consistent and sincere. People lingered in their seats, reluctant to break the connection they felt to the music, to the moment, and to the person who had created it. She felt no need to hurry, no need to satisfy expectations. She had done what mattered most. She had returned to herself and expressed her truth. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, she glanced at the piano one last time. It had been a partner, a companion, and a confidant. It had carried her emotions, her history, and her story with grace, responding to her touch with clarity and depth. She acknowledged it silently, grateful for the way it had allowed her to reclaim a part of herself that had long been hidden. The audience began to exit slowly, still processing the experience. Some were talking quietly, sharing impressions, recounting the moments that had struck them most. Others were simply silent, lost in thought, carrying the memory of what they had witnessed. The laughter, whispers, and mockery that had filled the room earlier had vanished entirely, replaced by reflection, respect, and admiration. She stepped out into the night, the air cool against her skin, and felt a sense of peace that had been absent for years. She had faced the doubt, the judgment, and the years of silence. She had played not for recognition, not for applause, but for herself. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone present that true expression, grounded in life experience and authenticity, cannot be dismissed or diminished. Her steps were slow but purposeful, each one carrying her forward with the knowledge that she had reclaimed her voice and her story. The night was quiet around her, but inside, there was a sense of fulfillment, a warmth that came from reconnecting with a part of her soul that had been waiting patiently. She knew that the experience would remain with her, not as a performance, but as a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of authenticity. As the lights of the hall faded behind her, she understood something profound, that true strength does not always demand recognition, and true talent does not seek applause. Sometimes, it simply exists, quietly, waiting for the moment when it can be fully expressed. And when that moment arrives, It has the power to transform not only the person who creates it but also everyone who witnesses it. The story of that evening would linger in the memories of the audience, not as a spectacle, not as entertainment, but as a lesson in humility, patience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. She had returned to the piano, to herself, and in doing so, she had shown that even the quietest voice, when spoken with truth and courage, can command the attention of the world.